Hello, welcome everyone. On behalf of the Biochemical Society and the Portland Press, I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, which is part of the Biochemistry Focus webinar series. Topics in the series include different research areas in the molecular biosciences, as well as practical sessions to support career development, like this one looking at the environmental impact of lab research. Each webinar will give you the opportunity to ask questions via text in the question box, and we welcome suggestions for future topics and speakers for future webinars in the series. So please see the Biochemical Society website for more details. My name is Ben Foster. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Biochemistry at the University of Oxford. I'm a member of the departmental sustainability team, and I'm also a member of the research panel for signaling, looking at assessing meeting proposals and things like that. If you do want to get involved with Biochemical Society, obviously check their website. Today's webinar is titled Environmental Sustainability in Biomedical Laboratories. With the global concern of climate change, and I'm not sure you all saw COP26 a few weeks ago, both industry and academia have been instigating measures to reduce their environmental impact and to reduce the amount of waste that has been generated through their work. This has been no less pressing in biomedical laboratories, which have a significant carbon footprint. Today, we've invited three speakers whose roles centre on increasing the environmental sustainability of lab work through the implementation of sustainable lab programmes, with particular focus on the Laboratory Efficiency Assessment Framework, otherwise known as the LEAF. Using data-driven objectives for reducing energy use and waste, and providing realistic and actually actionable processes, these schemes are being used increasingly in laboratories across the UK, and the speakers will provide an introduction to them and answer any questions you might have about access to them and implementing them in your labs, in your departments. During the session, we will welcome Martin Farley, who will provide an introduction to the LEAF platform, followed by a talk from Charlotte Helton from the sustainability team in Oxford about setting up the local infrastructure for sustainable labs. And finally, we'll hear from Saroj Sauria at the Dunn School of Pathology in Oxford, who is a lab manager directly involved in carrying out sustainable lab initiatives. Before I hand over to our first speaker, I'd like to mention that questions will be asked at the end of the webinar, but please do send your questions throughout the talks. If you have a question, please type into the question box as shown in the image on the screen, starting with who your question is for, and we will try to answer as many as possible at the end. So today, our first invited speaker is Martin Farley, who is at UCL and at King's College in London. Martin developed and manages the Laboratory Efficiency Assessment Framework, otherwise known as the LEAF programme from UCL, where he works as their Sustainable Lab Advisor. He also works at King's College in London as their Sustainable Research Manager. So I'd like to hand over to Martin to give us a talk about his work and what the LEAF platform is.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Right, so greetings everybody. I assume you can hear and see everything all right just now.
Yeah.
Oh, my screen has just popped up in front of me, sorry. So I'm gonna kick off now. I'm gonna go through relatively quickly just because I've got a fair bit I wanna chat on, but so to set the scene, I just wanted to talk about why we're talking about, why we're discussing sustainability in laboratories in the first place. And really what I wanted to say is that, you know, when we take a step back and look at science as a whole, we can see that we have, first of all, the largest workforce that we've ever had. I think I saw a statistic that said that 90% of researchers ever alive are alive today, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. We obviously have plenty left to research, and that's sort of a given. We also are in the most competitive funding environment that we've ever been when it comes to funding research. So there's more money going into science, but overall the chances of accessing those funds are at an all-time low, probably because we have a lot of scientists and increased competition. We're also in the midst of a climate crisis, which is going to affect every facet of society, and science is no different. So it is going to impact science, and we'll talk about that. But something else I want to mention is just the methods of science are also under duress. And what I mean by that is you might have come across the crisis of reproducibility and discussions around open access of science. And essentially, what I'm trying to make the argument is that with the amount of resources that we invest in science itself, if the science itself is not as reproducible or is not as accessible as we'd like it to be, in some ways, if we're quite brutal, then we could say that it's not the best investment or use of those resources that it took to generate that data, particularly if it's not reproducible. This is a survey from Nature where they, 90% of researchers said that there was some sort of reproducibility crisis, but 2/3 of which thought that they had safeguards in place. The other reason that we're talking about this is that our mechanism for improvement is there's a duality there. So in both sustainability and reproducibility, the mechanism of improvement is often through good lab practices. And this is a slide that looks at how we would improve reproducibility in science facilities. So essentially what we're trying to say is that reproducible science is sustainable science and vice versa. In a long-winded way, what I'm trying to say is that we have the largest workforce, we have plenty left to research, we have an extremely competitive funding environment, we're also in the midst of a climate crisis, and we have concerns over our methods of science, or considerations over it. You couple that with the fact that we're in the midst of this, we've set a net zero target for the UK of 2050, but we also want to massively increase our investment in the sciences. The UK invests a much lower percentage of its GDP in science than the other sort of big research nations, and there's a plan from UKR to increase that. In short, what I'm trying to say is that we can't keep growing science the way we have done. We need to look at the sustainability and efficiency of science as it grows if we're going to meet our carbon targets and continue to do the science that we want to do. And so that's what we're, that's sort of the background of why we're here. I wanted to give you a quick quiz instead of just reading out some stats. So I thought this is a nicer way to absorb some of this information. So lab plastics are estimated to contribute what percentage towards the total of the total global plastic waste in 2014? I'll put the caveat that more research is needed in this, and of course these plastics are not going to float in a Pacific island. They're going to be incinerated at high temperatures, which doesn't necessarily help our sustainability goals in the UK. The answer is C, 1.8%. A new ultra-low temperature freezer consumes as much energy in a year as, we definitely have more than 500 of these at UCL, and I'm sure you have more than 500 of these at Oxford. And the answer is a household. So, each -80, I've called them ultra low temperatures, but each -80 or -70 hopefully will consume as much as a household. Your fume cupboards will use around 2 to 3 houses worth of energy per fume cupboard. Researchers accounted for what percentage of the world population in 2013? I'll put this on now. We don't actually know the total carbon emissions of science, but we do know that it's just under 2% of the world's GDP. The answer here is B, it's 0.1%. And I wanted to just relay that because, as researchers, you actually have an outsized impact on the environment through your work. And it's not just in terms of the impact of your research itself, but it's in the conduct of the research and the resources required to facilitate the operations that we have in big science facilities like we have at Oxford and UCL and around the UK. Between 2007 and 13, the world economy grew by 20.1%. How fast did research grow by, essentially, in that same period of time? And I'm just for the sake of brevity and speed, I'm going to tell you, but this is the one that usually confuddles people, and the answer is D. It's 30.5%. Essentially, just trying to point out is that science is growing quicker, and it still is, actually. UNESCO has some more recent data, and essentially, science is outpacing the global economy in terms of growth. So it's a high growth area. This is just to highlight that point. So how much does science grow? I should have changed this. It's how much does scientific output grow by every year? And this is from a 2014 study that was looking at the publication rate. It relates back to that thing that I said before about roughly 90% of researchers ever alive are alive today. The answer here they put was D, 8 to 9%. Which incredibly gave a doubling time of just 9 years, which is incredible when you think about it. The amount of resources that we put in and how fast it's growing, really. So it's just it's yeah. And I'm sure COVID in some ways has not stunted it, and you know, despite its challenges. I don't actually know the answer to this question. This one is just a bit of a provoking question, but it's what percentage of the research conducted gets published or is accessible or is shared widely? So for all the investment that we put into generating data, you know, how much of it can we access and is reproducible if we want to be tough? Most labs, when I ask them this question, they say around 20 to 50%, which I'm not saying that's a rule of thumb, but I just think it's an interesting way to think about all we put into it. So essentially what I'm trying to say is labs are very resource intensive. They use around 3 to 10 times more energy than typical academic spaces, but they can use 100 times more. You know, if you're in an MRI, it's going to be 100 times more so than your home. At UCL, they're using, you know, the labs are responsible for more than 50% of our energy consumption. I wouldn't be surprised if that figure is the same in or higher in Oxford. I think at King's it's actually 60% or so. So this topic, sustainable labs and green labs, is a pretty big one. And I want to say is that there's a lot going on in green chemistry, which I'd encourage you to look up if you're more on the chemistry side, but that's really about the replacement and substitution of chemicals for less harmful versions, either for us or the planet. There's a lot of momentum behind that, in part because there's funds behind that, but there's some funds in these areas as well. You know, there's a lot of work going on about the built environment, so trying to ensure that our buildings are net zero, which is important. But actually the larger impact is how we use the buildings. So, you know, the energy consumption, of course, is tied into the building and the equipment, but overall the carbon emissions, and that's a really important thing that I want to differentiate, you know, energy consumption isn't all your carbon emissions. Your carbon emissions are also all the materials that you use and buy. So the equipment and consumables and how you interact with them, which is lab operations. This next slide is just highlighting that difference between energy and carbon emissions. So this is some data from UCL that we have, which is not as precise as it could be, in part because, you know, we don't know truly the carbon emissions embodied in all the stuff we buy. But if you imagine, you know, when we build a building, you know, it uses energy, and you can see that particularly because we buy energy from increasingly renewable sources, there's less carbon emissions associated with that energy consumption, which means that the greater impact that we have is on all the stuff we use. And we think that at UCL, probably 50% or 52% of our carbon emissions, so half of our energy, probably half of our products, are tied into science facilities. You know, probably half of our travel, roughly. And, you know, we have these targets of net zero. And so, you know, we start to realize that the importance of lab and science facilities, whether it's in energy consumption or overall carbon emissions, becomes really important. By the way, you know, this isn't precise because most companies don't put full LCAs or life cycle analysis on products to tell you about the carbon emissions, but we need more of that. We do have guidance on that in LEAF, but I'll stop there for now. I wanted to give one tip, one practical tip today, which is just related to tips, which is that recycling tip boxes is great, but reuse of them is even better, because reusing the box means, you know, there's not more use of carbon emissions to generate plastic and to recycle it. So if you can reload your tip boxes, obviously that's better than recycling them through a tip box recycling program. And those are the type of things that we're trying to recommend and drive in labs. There's a lot going on around sustainable labs. There's a huge amount going on in the area, and I won't go through all this all, but I do need to give a shout. You know, there's the Caring Scientist, which is a podcast. There's some national networks that are together now. In Germany, there's the Max Planck Society. Green Your Lab is a great network website that you can join. And most big institutions now have green lab programs and sustainable lab programs of different sorts. So it's an exciting area to be working in. If you're in the UK, you can join our network, which is the Lean Network. You can join it through there. But there's free resources there on sustainable science, and it's really for anybody that has an interest in the topic. And I'll leave it at there for now. You've heard a lot probably about net zero targets. You know, in COP, there was a lot of discussion around net zero. The UK has this net zero target for 2050, which is fantastic. Meanwhile, the UKRI, which is the largest funder in the UK, has really pioneered by having this 2040 target. And, you know, at UCL, we've got a 2030 target. And I think at Oxford, you have a target as well. I won't speak on it. I'll let Charlotte is probably a better place. But point I'm just trying to make is that there's all these targets that are out there. And, you know, we recognize that setting the targets is tough, but, you know, the real tough part is achieving the targets. And you know, as I showed you, science is a huge source of carbon emissions for our institutions. So, you know, what I would argue is that we need standards to get there. Health and safety, you know, when we wanted science to become safe, we didn't ask every institution to invent their own safety standard. We created a standard and let, you know, institutions work off it. And that's kind of what I'm saying we need to do with sustainability. You know, we don't have time in a lot of ways to let everybody discover their own path. And it's great to have lots of ideas, but we do need central standards that allow people to just know what to do, what actions they need to take so that they can get on with their other work as well. And that's why we've developed LEAF from UCL. It's a standard in sustainable lab operations. So it focuses on how can you, those who work in labs, make your labs more sustainable. It's got criteria in the areas you might expect: waste, samples, procurement, but also some on research quality in recognition of what I mentioned before about reproducible science being sustainable science. It's broken up in bronze, silver, gold criteria, and it's a user-led initiative. You know, I think that's really important, is that we don't, you know, we're not being led by the manufacturers. We are working with users directly, apart from manufacturers, to understand what they can do and helping them in that sense. We're not a profit, you know, geared organization at all. Within LEAF, there's calculators, which are optional, but they allow you to estimate the carbon and financial savings, because actually when you do this stuff, you tend to save money and carbon, and quantifying it, well, you know, we wouldn't be in science if we weren't into some sort of quantification, really. So that's why we've put those in there. I won't go through these all, but there's a lot of resources to help you through. In particular, I want to point out there's the consumables and plastics guide. We're also updating our equipment guide, because we recognize that, you know, it's one thing to ask, you know, to set targets, but we need to give people the guidance on how to achieve those. LEAF is now online, and you know, we're here as a resource to help you get on the system, but we've had 51 institutions sign up, which has been incredible. UKRN, which is the UK Reproducibility Network, has helped us develop the criteria on reproducibility. And we're working with some funders. I think UKRN and MRC are going to announce pretty soon that they're installing LEAF in some of their institutes soon. And there's just been great uptake, you know, and I'm not going to go through them all, but it's gone a bit international. It's just been, and we've just started since February online. So it's just been, it's been a great journey, and really great to see everybody's feedback. So last thing I just want to leave on is to say is that, you know, LEAF is about operational. It's about enabling action now. You know, that's the goal of this program, and is to facilitate, enable action now, because we need action now. But, you know, I just want to highlight that you're all researchers, and to point out that more research is needed in this topic. So if you're ever, you know, if you ever want to go off in that direction, you know, more research to enable more action is needed still. You know, I put that stat about 1.8% of plastics being coming from labs. You know, we need more data in that area. Those figures need to be improved. That's it for myself for now. You can find me on Twitter, Leaf on Twitter. You can find my email. But thank you to all my co-speakers, Ben for facilitating, and Sandra in the background. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin, for that insightful talk. As I said, any questions, do click in the chat, and then we'll ask them at the end. So our second speaker today is Charlotte Helton. Charlotte is a sustainability project manager for the lab optimization here at the University of Oxford, as well as overseeing and managing the LEAF award program here. He manages the lab equipment upgrade projects and works on any new laboratory builds and retrofits to ensure the labs are built with sustainability in mind. So I'll just hand over to Charlotte.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that introduction. Can you see my slides and hear me okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm Charlotte Horton. So I'm the Sustainability Project Manager here at the University of Oxford, and I just want to chat a little bit about sustainable labs. So first I'll give you a bit of an introduction to me and my background, and then the environmental sustainability strategy here at the university. Then I'll talk about the LEAF programme, so our 2021 award winners, and then the timeline for next year. And then also I want to talk to you about what resources are available through the sustainability team to help you with your LEAF criteria and your LEAF awards. So I started in this job role on the 1st of October after finishing my Masters in Environmental Leadership. And then prior to my Masters, I was working in the chemical industry. So I was completing my degree apprenticeship in chemical science. So because I did it as an apprenticeship, I got 7 years laboratory experience at a chemical company, so making organic dyes and markers. So I'm very aware of the amount of plastics, the amount of resources, and how energy intensive labs are. So obviously Martin gave a really good overview of laboratories' environmental impact. So I've joined the university to try and reduce the impact that our institutions and labs have. So the university itself, the strategy was released in March, and it's got 2 main targets. So we want to be net zero carbon by 2035. So obviously the UK is saying 2050, and we're going to try and do it by 2035. And we also want to have a net gain in biodiversity by that time as well. We've got 4 enablers, so governance, reporting, funding, and offsetting, that are going to all help us with those targets. The offsetting enabler is not going to be looked at until 2030, because the idea is we'll reduce our emissions as much as possible before we start offsetting them. The 10 priorities set out in the strategy cover lots of different things. So we're talking about research, so things to do with labs, the carbon emissions from buildings, biodiversity, and then there's also things about sustainable travel, so internationally and local travel for staff and students, and then learning from the pandemic as well. So one of the things we want to do for sustainable labs is encourage them as much participation in the LEAF programme as possible here at the university. And last year we had 23 labs that received a LEAF award, which was great. So we had 22 from the Medical Sciences division, and that was 6 from Biochemistry, so 4 silver awards and 2 bronze. There was also gold from Paediatrics, bronze in Physiology. There was bronze at the Radcliffe Department of Medicine, and there was 13 awards to the Dunn School of Pathology, which included 3 golds, 7 silvers and 4 bronzes, which is amazing. And Saraj will talk you through more of their initiatives at the Dunn School that they're doing for their LEAF Awards soon. And then we had 1 social sciences representative who was from the School of Geography, who the geolabs were awarded a bronze. So we had no one from MPLS, but hopefully next year we will have a higher uptake and we'll get more awards. But it was great to see 23 labs this year doing it. So the actual timeline, we're looking at a submission date for the end of May. So you can start your registrations now, start setting your labs up, start deciding which criteria you're going to go for, bronze, silver or gold. And then we're going to organise peer-to-peer audits, which will take place in June or July next year. So this means the peer-to-peer audits mean that learning takes place between labs. So we'll match you up with a lab that's doing the same level, but in a different department or in a different building, so that we can get some cross-contamination. Contamination is probably not the right word when we're talking about labs, but of ideas and things like that. And then we'll publish the awards prior to the new academic year. So the plan for next term is to have some regular workshops and Q&A sessions. So I can either come around to different buildings, come around to different departments and speak to you and run a workshop on how LEAF works, or I'll just have some drop-in sessions, so Q&A sessions, and they could either be in person or online. If you want one of those specifically for your lab or for your department, please get in touch with me, let me know, and I'll come and visit and talk you through everything. So I'm just going to go through the resources available. So you can either contact me, so here's my email address or my phone number for any of these, or feel free to email the sustainability admin email address as well. And there's also quite a lot of resources available on our website. So the sustainability website has links to LEAF and links to the equipment guide and plastic guides as well. So one of the things discussed in the LEAF criteria is about switching off equipment to save energy. So we've got color-coded equipment switch-off stickers that you can see here. So you've got the traffic light system. So please feel free to get in touch and we can give you these and they can encourage equipment switch-off. If you're really interested in different pieces of equipment and how much energy they're using, we can provide you with some energy meters as well, so you can actually monitor your pieces of equipment and see what is the most intense piece of equipment that you've got in your lab. And also, if you've got some non-sensitive pieces of equipment and you want to have timer switches for, they can be purchased with the sustainability team. So again, just drop me an email or give me a ring if you would like some timer switches for your labs, and we can provide those for you. If you've got fume cupboards, we can provide you with sort of shut the sash stickers. I still can't say that, because shutting a fume-covered sash reduces its energy consumption by about 40%. So we want to encourage people to be doing this whenever the fume cupboards aren't in use, and the traffic light stickers do encourage people to do this, and they're available for your lab. If you have quite a lot of fume cupboards and you want to run a shut the sash program, we are here to support you with that as well. So we can come if you want to do audits, if you want to run a workshop on why you should be shutting the sash, let me know, and that's something we can organise as well. And then one of the main things you all might be interested in is that we can do equipment replacement funding. So we offer funding for the replacement of old, inefficient lab equipment. We are targeting the most wasteful devices, so anything with a heating or cooling element. So ultra low temperature freezers, like Martin mentioned before, if you have an old ultra low temperature freezer and you want to replace it, we can help you fund that. So the level of funding depends on the type of equipment, the age, and the energy demand. So it's a very old piece of equipment, it's got a high energy demand, and the new piece of equipment you're going to buy is very energy efficient, we can fully fund it. But it depends on the kilowatt hours savings, it might be partially funded. But there's a lot of information on the sustainability website again, at the funding page, but also get in touch and I can give you a hand with that. So this is just for replacing equipment, but if you want to buy a new piece of equipment but you want to make sure it's the most efficient option, then also get in touch and I can advise you there as well. So thank you. I think I probably sped through that a bit too quick, but yeah, if you've got any questions at the end, please let me know. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, as I said, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and then we'll ask them at the end. So our final speaker today is Saroj Sauria. Saroj is the lab manager in the RAF lab at the Dunn School of Pathology at the University of Oxford. She's extremely passionate about reducing plastic consumption and waste in lab settings. In addition, she works with a lot of local communities to help reduce all kinds of waste, CO2 emissions, and just generally saving the environment. She does a lot of work locally in Oxford. So yeah, I will hand over.
Thank you, Ben, for the introduction and also inviting me to present what we do in the RAF lab on the environmental sustainability in biomedical laboratories. So first of all, let me tell about me. I've got MSc in cell biology and a PhD from University of Oxford. I did some sales work as well as product specialist in India, also selling various products. And I got some experience in working in the biotech company at Oxford as well. I've got 20 years of research scientist experience at Cambridge University and University of Oxford. And currently I'm the lab manager at the RAF lab at Dunn School of Pathology. I'm a chair of the Dunn School Green Group as well. And also I'm a volunteer and member of the local groups such as Marston Community Gardening and Eco Group. I have created and handle their website and Twitter account as well. And if you want to know what other activities they are doing, you can just go onto their website and check. So how did it all begin for me? It started when I watched this BBC Blue Planet 2 series from David Attenborough, and when I saw this sort of loads of plastic in the sea, and then I decided, oh, I need to do something about in the laboratory as well. So I created and shared a document to reduce the plastic consumption in the lab. I got various information from the internet and also talking to all the people in the Dunn School and how they are reducing their plastic in the lab. And I created this document and I presented in the RAF lab retreat in October 2019. And they shared it on Twitter and it was widely sort of publicized, and people really want to do something in the laboratory to reduce plastic waste. So then the Dunn School, we created a green group in January 2020, where we are like 10 to 20 different voluntary members. And then last year in September 2020, Dunn School went for the LEAF, and 4 labs were awarded the LEAF award, and RAF lab received the Silver award. So then this year, as Charlotte was mentioning, 13 labs out of 23 from the university were awarded to the Dunn School, and RAF lab received the Gold award. So what do we do in the green group? We are a group of different people from different areas, group leaders, students, postdocs, laboratory managers, stores, facility manager, HOD secretary. We meet regularly, approximately 5 to 6 meetings per year with minutes taken. We work with the university sustainability team. Earlier it was Steffi, Harriet, and Viret, and now Charlotte. So we have conducted a survey at the Dunn School to see if there's an interest in sustainability. And it was, we found that there were like 60% of the people who were quite interested in sustainability in the Dunn School. We created the awareness through emails, notice board, newsletters, leaflets, and Twitter. We introduced the leaf to the Dunn School. We created various posters for recycling and also for washing and reusing plastic wares. We made various checklists, and now we are working on eco-mapping list. We created the awareness, and we organized a climate awareness week in 2020, September, and this year we participated in Oxfordshire Big Green Week. We introduced glass or ceramic mugs for drinking water or hot drinks in the Dunn School, so that we don't use the single-use plastic cups or the cardboard ones. We created the good habits by getting the stickers from the university sustainability team and sticking it all over throughout the department. We also organize the Bike Doctor monthly, where people just pay for the parts. We have got the TerraCycle gloves and mask recycling box at the Dunn School. We also have the food bins around, and we wash and reuse 50 ml Falcon tubes for the whole of the Dunn School. And in the RAF lab, we reuse all these by washing them. So we organized this Climate Awareness Week in September 2020, and it was during the lockdown, and it wasn't possible to do something physically. So we just sent out an email every day. Every day has a different topic. And in addition, we also contacted various suppliers to send their sustainable goodies, such as this one. So this is the Green Group notice board, and this is the Green Group table that we have sort of made permanently, hopefully. And you can see all the different stickers we kept out so that people can take it, and then different goodies from different suppliers that you can see over here. They were kept at the different days. And then we had all these different bottles, which are biodegradable bottles, t-shirts, coffee mugs, then all these different goodies. So yeah, it was very, very important to bring on board all these suppliers, because they were the one who were sending us all these different packaging materials and stuff that probably we don't need, and we need to sort of get them involved as well. So then this year we organized, we just participated in the Oxfordshire Big Green Week by doing different things. We have got the Green Group flag, and we flew that in that week. Plus, we participated in the Walk for Life on Earth, wearing our Green Group t-shirts. Then we did the litter picking also, along with Master and Eco Group, and other different activities such as plant swap, then Bike Doctor, and then Ready Steady Cook to reduce food waste, Grounds Up Arts, and also to show that how much plastic waste we generate in the lab. And I also did the climate conversation also to help the University of Oxford students to talk about the climate change. And we created various posters such as this one. This is to show how we can wash and reuse our 50 ml Falcon tubes, the toothpicks, and the different columns, Kaizen columns. And you can see this is the amount of money we spend at the Dunn School, and that is the amount you can save per year, plus the amount of plastic going into the environment or for the landfill. So then we also do the gloves and mask recycling, and we have this single box from the TerraCycle. And in the labs, people have these boxes where they fill it up and then bring it down, or the Green Group will bring it down from different laboratories and then put them in the box and send it back for recycling. So this is the way we decontaminate and collect our tubes, wash the tubes in dishwasher, autoclave, and then they are ready for use for different experiments. They are all sterile. We don't suggest yet for the mammalian tissue culture, but it's very good for bacterial cultures and protein work. So as I said, the RAF lab received the Gold Award this year, and these are the different initiatives that we have been doing in the RAF lab. And every lab is different, and we are the fly lab, and this was very important for us to reuse our embryo collection plates. Then also different things that we do, cell spreaders and a lot of other things not working, not flying, working from home, planting more trees, and all these things. Then in future, what we want to do as a RAF lab, because as I said, we use quite a lot of plastic vials every month. We need to keep them alive, and we want to see if we can freeze the embryos so that we don't have to use quite a lot of plastic, and also to convert from plastic to glass vials or bottles. And as a Dunn School Green Group, we want to introduce the serological pipette, which is glass. And also we wanted to see if we can find the funding for 2 people to wash the tubes and pipettes. Plus now we want to see if we can get a Dunn School award, for LEAF award for the whole Dunn School. And finally, I would like to thank few people, especially Jordan, where I'm the lab manager, and he has given me full authority to sort of experiment in the lab and check if we can reduce a lot of different plastic waste and everything. And Matthew Freeman, who's the head of the department, and we have created this green group, and he's very supportive. RAF lab, Lee lab, washing up facility, workshop, Dunn School, and Oxford Biochemistry department, where they're helping us to convert from plastic to glass pipettes. The university sustainability team, especially Steffi, she has introduced us to the LEAF. And especially Martin, like whenever I sort of hear, I always get new information, and he's been so good in explaining LEAF and getting the LEAF and getting everybody throughout the world to be lab sustainable. And all these Twitter family, Amy for 50 ml Falcon tubes reuse, and Paul for embryo collection plates, urine, and Oxford Climate Society for the various seminars, my Twitter family, my local groups, and last but not the least, it's the Dunn School Green Group members. All of them, we all work so hard, and we are just the volunteers, and we take out time from our busy schedule and try to get the Dunn School environment sustainable. And this is my Twitter account if you want to see what's happening, and plus this is my email. You can be in touch with me, and I can yeah, you can take whatever information you want from me. And thank you very much, and I'll stop here for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Saroj. That was really good. So now we're going to go into a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for the speakers, do type them into the question box as shown in the image on the screen. If you can indicate who the question is for as well, that would also be helpful. There are a few that have already come in, so I will start asking them. There's a couple of questions I may merge. There's a couple looking at the percentage impact of the research industry as a percentage of all industries, and whether also there's a difference between industrial research and academic research, whether it's known if there's a discrepancy there. So I think, Martin, if you want to start with that, and if Charlotte, if you have any data from Oxford or not.
So I think I mentioned we don't really know the carbon emissions of science. We need more research in this space. So in short, I think we don't know. The comparison that I make is just that we know that it's around just under 2% of the world's GDP. We know from local examples that it's extremely resource intensive when compared to other industries, you know, from obviously compared to offices and things like that we have around our institutes. But more work is needed in this space, to be frank. We don't really know about the divide between academic and industry, in part because the academic is quite hard to quantify still. But I will say is that, you know, in part why we were mentioning the embodied carbon and life cycle assessments of things is that to even generate those numbers in the first place, ideally, we would have more data on the embodied carbon and the materials that we use, which we don't always have. We have to usually assess these retrospectively, which makes it a big challenge. We can quantify energy well, but the overall carbon emissions are tricky. So it's not a perfect answer, sorry, but would encourage if anybody wants to do research in this space.
Okay. Maybe this is a question for Charlotte. So for the replacement of old equipment, I wonder whether you've approached the vendor community, so the vendors that provide that as well, whether they're involved in the recycling or the reuse of certain old equipment, perhaps, or parts of it.
Yeah, so we for any equipment that you're replacing, the suppliers will be taking back your old equipment for disposal. So we are speaking to suppliers about whether they would reuse the parts and they would reuse things rather than just sending things for incineration or things like that. Because like Martin says, you've got to look at the carbon emissions of what you're buying as well. So that is something we look at to apply for funding. You can either come to us with a route for how you're going to get rid of your old piece of equipment, or we will speak to the suppliers about that for the new ones.
Okay. So a couple of questions here, so I direct towards Saraj. One says, "Hi, Saraj, great work. So what has been the biggest barrier in implementing sustainable practices in the lab for you? Has it been?"
I think it's just probably people are scared of using like if it's a sterile or anything like that. That's the biggest barrier. But then if you try to convince them, yes, I've used it and it should be fine, and go ahead, and then yeah, that's how it was the biggest one. That was for me, like just to convince the scientists, yes, it's fine, it's all right, it's clean and nice. So that's the only thing I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah, Martin.
Just to add, I think Saraj, it's worth crediting the willpower she has as well, to do some of this stuff, because she cares, so she takes these actions. We usually say to start with the motivated labs, because it does take some consideration to reconsider, what is feasible to reuse, what not, and sometimes to do the washing or to work with people around these spaces. So I would say the motivation and at least the fire, while it's still optional to do this stuff, is important.
Okay, thanks. There's a question here about the subject of building efficiency. So the question asks, are there any thoughts on whether the exhaust flow from fume stacks can be harnessed to drive small wind turbines? And I guess on top of that, whether you can use sort of the heat generated within buildings, sort of water cooling sort of systems or not. So whether you can recycle some of that. I guess Martin or Charlotte, if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, so at the university, that is something we look at. So heat recovery from fume cupboards going back into buildings. So we have an engineering sustainability project manager that looks at heating, cooling, ventilation as part of our team. So if that's something you wanted to look at as part of your building in the lab, then obviously you can get in touch with the sustainability team if that's an idea and you think you have enough fume cupboards to heat the whole building from their from their heat recovery, then let us know and we can look into that. And we're also looking at sort of free chilling on cooling on chillers, so ensuring that they're in the right places to not need excessive cooling and heating. So it's something we look at as a university, but yeah, get in touch with us and for your specific building and we can let you know.
Okay, cool. Martin, did you have?
It was just to add, I just thought it was an interesting little point about adding the wind turbines at the top of fume covered stacks. I haven't seen that. Very quickly, I'll just say is that legally, when the fumes are supposed to be discharged at a certain distance from the roof so that it doesn't go back into whoever's on the ground and etc. I suspect the answer would be that putting turbines in might slow down and just require more energy to push out to reach that discharge velocity. And there's something around that, and also the turbines in. What I have seen, just for fun, I'll mention this, is that there's some technology where they look at changing the extract discharge rates at the roof level based on your wind. Because essentially most buildings are designed to have an extract rate based on a strong wind, and most of the year you don't have that wind. So there has been some work in that space. And I just thought it was an interesting idea and comment on.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of related questions about reusing plastic tubes. So Saraj, you might have some insight into this. So one question looks at decontaminating clean plastic with that have been used to store harsh chemicals, and whether they'll be able to reuse them safely. And the other one looks at reusing plastic using category 3 labs, so more biohazardous waste. Whether you had any insight into that?
Yeah, so the tubes one, yeah, we use the distill, which yeah, you use overnight, and then you wash it very, very well with water, tap water, and then in a dishwasher. So nothing is sort of there, and people have used it for protein purification and also for not the tissue culture, but the bacterial culture and yeast culture. And yeah, they haven't found any problems with them, and definitely it's much, much better to use them, and especially they've been washed so many times and nothing is left. And if it is work on, definitely I would say yes, but it's not. It's a distill, and it doesn't keep any contaminants there. And for the Cat 3, yeah, so if people are using it for Cat 3, that's fine, but we don't take those tubes to wash. And if they are working with hazardous chemicals or hazardous bacteria, yeah, we don't use it. But they can use it for their own, but we don't wash them, definitely. It's not good for me to wash them and then keep them. But yeah, we don't allow them to do it in the tissue culture to use, because yeah, we still don't know how good they are. They might inhibit their culture, but we are working on it. Definitely, we are working on it. Thank you.
Okay. There's this kind of related question, but I don't know. There's someone asking about using the Research Institute grows many plants, so seed and plug module trays and pots. I don't know if anyone here has experience of plant science or working with plants, but has anyone had experience of using sort of biodegradable cardboard versions for this sort of work? Or does anyone know if anyone has?
No, I mean, you still can use the tubes, definitely. But yeah, I don't know about the cardboards and things, yes. But
I could just say it's not about the pots, but I will say is that Gen Lab, for example, has created new growth chambers that they essentially they've mapped out LEDs to mimic the old bulbs, and they just use a heck of a lot less energy essentially for the same the same space and etc. So at least in terms of growth chambers, there's been work on reducing the energy consumption, but I'm not familiar with the pots. And if you do find out anything about that, feel free to, yeah, it sounds like a nice little potential case study.
Cool. There's sort of another question from the audience is, has any institute worked on polystyrene waste? How is that recycled, or is it been sort of abandoned now in institutes as far as, so I know there's give back schemes for various vendors, but I wonder if anywhere else looking at how that can be recycled. This is open to.
yeah, and NEB still take the boxes back, definitely. And yeah, we do it from the dance school, but not the other company. I mean, yeah, it's a very horrible waste, and we just have to put them in the bin. And yeah, it could be recyclable, but they don't take it back, definitely.
And I'll comment very quickly. What Suraj said is entirely correct, and you know, for the most part, they're not recyclable. Would ask not to go in clinical waste if you can avoid it. Go into general waste as opposed to clinical, unless it is hazardous. NEB has a take-back scheme where they actually reuse the boxes, as she mentioned. Promega have a take-back scheme, but they only compress it. They don't actually recycle and reuse. Well, they don't reuse it. But the last thing I'll just say is that there was a project that's been funded, I believe, from the MRC in the north of England to look at actually recycling those type of plastics. It was more of a research program. But yeah, the polystyrene in its current form is not recyclable. But it's hopefully in the future. But some of the other plastics you have are super recyclable, like the tip boxes and etc. Albeit if reuse is better. But yeah.
Yeah, I know Select Environmental, the waste company we use at the university, is looking into recycling all different kinds of plastics, and polystyrene is on their list to look at. So if they figure anything out, I will let everyone know, and we can get that implemented.
Cool. There's a quick question about TerraCycle. So I don't know if Saraj, you have insight into this, about what TerraCycle actually do with the masks and gloves once they've collected the box.
Yeah, so once they've collected it, they sort of keep it for some time so that if something is there, it can be maybe like a month or something, and then they send it to the company and they make it different products out of it. So it's not just they make the gloves, they can't really make the gloves, they convert it into different products like benches or things like that. So yeah, I have seen their videos, but yeah, I'm hoping to get more information so that they can give us the certificate, yes, they do it. But definitely we need that, yeah, something that, yes, they are doing it. They're not just dumping it somewhere, definitely, but.
Yeah, so I have one quick question. It's kind of direct for Martin. Whether you envisage the LEAF accreditation scheme to be used by funding bodies. So you have funding bodies that require some sort of public outreach to do alongside their research work. But do you see that having this sort of scheme would be a requirement for getting certain funding from funding bodies to encourage labs and institutes to take this up?
Well, yeah, I'm actually quite happy you asked that. I should have mentioned this, because one of the original goals of doing LEAF was that we went to the funders years ago and we said, why don't you have targets around sustainability like you do with the Athena Swan or you know, data management and et cetera. And they said, well, you can't tell us what a sustainable lab looks like in a comparable fashion that we can you know, integrate into a funding mechanism, which was a fair point back. And that's in part why we did LEAF. I will say is that the funders for the first time have started asking about what institutions are doing about sustainability. So they're not sort of requiring anything as much as they want to know what you're doing in this space. And that UKRI, when they put out that 2040 net zero target, they said that, you know, this year or next, they're going to be coming out with targets for the funding recipients as well. So it's kind of a watch this space answer. You know, that's why we did LEAF, and we hope that it's a useful tool, and we're still trying to engage the funders. But I think, in short, you know, the funders are going to want to see action in this space increasingly. Like, you know, they're going to need to, and yeah, it's a wait and see. But we have worked with them enough to know that they would accept LEAF as, you know, achieving their early questions and requisites. But yeah, hopefully they, yes, push for plenty of stuff, and it's super simple for everybody, and nobody feels too pressured by it when it comes to grants application process and et cetera.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's all in the questions from the audience. I guess I can sort of start to wrap up. So yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending, and thank you to all the speakers for coming today and giving insight into environmental sustainability in labs. You can continue the conversation online, so at BiochemSoc and at BP Publishing, Portland Press on Twitter. If you want to continue the conversation there, and the speakers here have also sort of advertised their various socials if you want to get into contact with them as well. We do welcome suggestions for future topics and speakers to feature in the Biochemistry Focus webinar series. If you have an idea for a webinar in 2022, we do invite you to submit a proposal, and that can be done via the Biochemical Society website. If you have missed any of the 40-odd webinars that we've run as part of this series, but you'd like to watch them again, they are available via the website or on the YouTube channel, as this will be in a few weeks' time. The recording from, as I said, the recording from today's webinar will be available to watch in a couple of weeks once it's been uploaded. You can find more information about the webinars, propose your webinar, and watch previous recordings all on the website, as I've mentioned, as was on the previous slide. So our next Biochemistry Focus webinar is titled Mapping Development and Regeneration in Vivo and In Vitro, and this will be held on Thursday, the 9th of December at 3 p.m. GMT. During this session, we'll be here from the Biochemical Society's 2021 Early Career Research Award winner, Dr. Rosa Vento-Tormo, at the Wellcome Sanger Institute, who will present her award-winning research. You can register now for this free webinar via the Biochemical Society website. Finally, I want to highlight that in these new and challenging times, it's more important than ever to stay connected and engage with the biosciences community. So you can join the Biochemical Society's community of researchers and specialists, and it's a great way to stay connected. with fellow molecular bioscientists. I know I've met a lot of other people through the Biochemical Society, and it's been good to get involved with different aspects that they do and different things that they do. There's a variety of benefits. So this includes discounted registration fees at society courses and meetings. You get exclusive access to a wide range of grants and bursaries for traveling to conferences, whether they're organised by the society or not. You do get also personal online access to 2 of their journals, and you get a lot more. So do visit their website for more. And as I said, as a postdoc, it's good to sort of meet other biochemists, not just in the UK, but abroad as well. So again, I'd like to thank the speakers once again and the audience for attending today. And I'd like to wish you a good day and goodbye.